So in the old days of the library, the library staff would put together a book, which they would probably sell as a fundraiser, of cookie recipes or just general recipes. You may find some of those old books on eBay or in the Rockland Room or somewhere in the archive. This is kind of like the modern version of that, and we're just dealing with cookies. So the first recipe, that's my batter there on the left, is the holiday mix-up cookie. And this is originally, it's a great recipe because it's originally from Debbie Murphy, who doesn't work anymore, but she visits us from time to time. She was just in today. I said, Debbie, if your ears are burning this afternoon, that's because we're going to be talking about your holiday mix-up cookies. And a few years ago, I said, oh, that old recipe you gave me, it's beat up. So the next time she came in, she gave me a brand new recipe card here. So it's pretty simple, but it's half chocolate chips and half M&Ms. And so it's a fun, but it's got oatmeal in it. So I always tell everyone when I make them, you can have more because it has oatmeal in it and it's good for you. But it does have quite a bit of sugar as well. So don't eat too many of them. Debbie just told me today when she was in, sometimes she adds a little bit of coconut, which I have never done. But I think that's the great thing about recipes and cooking is you can kind of invent things on the fly and add things as you wish. In a related also chocolate chip cookie are the Neiman Marcus chocolate chip cookies. And I printed this off the internet. It's kind of beat up. And these are actually similar because they both have both baking soda and baking powder, and they're also mostly brown sugar. But this doesn't call for the M&Ms, but in this picture, what I did was I actually substituted half of the chocolate chips. This calls for a heck of a lot of chocolate chips. It's a cup and a half of chocolate chips. So that's what makes it so good. But what I did was I made it for my kids, and I did half M&Ms, half chocolate chips, similar to the previous recipe. And the other thing this calls for is a teaspoon and a half of instant espresso. So you don't want to give that to the kids. So, depending on who I'm making this for, I will include the espresso or I won't include the espresso. And also, if I don't have instant espresso, sometimes I just use ground, finely ground coffee. But that's my go-to chocolate chip cookie recipe. Another thing is this is only 300 degrees. And it's 20 minutes. So it cooks a little longer at a lower temperature. So that's the other part about that. And now we will go to Mary, Mrs. Phillips, on her Merry Christmas cookies, which she actually made. This is a picture from this today. She brought these in. Some of them were crumpled up. If you have any mistakes when you're baking, you always have to eat the mistakes. She says, well, it wasn't a mistake. It was my husband crushed that little man over there, so I had to eat him earlier today.
Okay. It's a fairly easy recipe. It comes from a well-used cookbook that the pages are coming out and it's falling apart. That I cook with my mother and I cook with my daughter. It's easy to roll out. You can see that it doesn't take fancy ingredients. And the lemon flavoring is nice. It's got a spicy flavor without being overly spicy. And the icing is just a powdered sugar, a little more lemon flavoring on my part, and enough water to spread the icing around. And I did I I did these kind of decorating to the kind that I would have done as a kid. You can just take your Ziploc bag and put a colored icing in and put a little face on something if you want. So it's kind of like a goofy reindeer is supposed to be. Probably shouldn't have done them in white. So it's a very easy recipe. Once you roll out the dough and you cut your things out, and I always bake on a parchment sheet because I'm lazy and I don't want to clean a pan, and it helps. Then you don't have to worry about it sticking. They cook very quickly. I can't remember what temperature it was, but it was like 425 or something for just 8 minutes. So it's really fast. And since I work, I did these over 3 days. The first evening, I made the dough, put it in the refrigerator because you have to chill it. The next morning, I took it out before I went to work and rolled it out and quickly baked them. And then the third day, I decorated them. So if you don't have a lot of time, you can do it in steps. And I recommend that so you don't overburden trying to chill the dough for 2 hours and then that kind of thing. This recipe is all over the internet. A lot of people have used it. It's easy to use with kids, grandkids. I highly recommend it.
Okay, Mary. I never used the parchment paper until Debbie recommended it to me. Now I always use parchment paper.
Yeah, it's a lazy person's way of cooking, let me tell you. I found out that use it for your brownies. I always had my brownies sticking to the pan, and just this year I used it for brownies, and it could lift the whole thing up. Pan, I could practically put it back in the closet.
Magic of parchment paper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. Here's another one from Mary. You want to talk about this one?
Okay, yeah. The other one is peppernuts, which is something that I ate as a child. I bought it in the store a lot. It's very uneven quality in the store. Usually it's hard as rocks. One time I did get it, and it was some semi-soft. So I thought this time I would make it. Now, if you look at the recipe for it, which Brian will send to you, it involves an awful lot of spices. So it's an expensive cookie to make. I found that out. Once you buy the anise and the cloves and the ginger, and some of it I had on hand. I had ginger, I had cinnamon, but there's a lot of different spices in it. The cookie that I made is about approximately that big, which I understand, according to my coworker, Karen, is twice as big as it should be, but it just means you get twice as much. And it smells wonderful. It has quite a bit of bite to it. It's not hard to make. You just put all the wet ingredients in one thing, and I did have to put the margarine and shortening. I had to melt that with the honey and molasses. So you melt it and then you cool it down. So and they tell you in the recipe, use shortening and margarine. I usually don't go out to buy margarine. So I use Crisco and margarine. Evidently, if you try butter or something like that, it's not going to work well, from what I've read. And you just dust it with some confectioner's sugar. I understand also from Karen Ostertag that once you make it, the spices will slowly mellow over a week. I gave my husband one of these cookies yesterday, actually several cookies, and he loved the spiciness of it. So if you like a really spicy type gingerbread type thing, it's reminiscent of gingerbread. This might be the cookie for you. I think for kids, it might not be their favorite cookie unless they've grown up with it. So This is a special cookie. I think I'll make it for my sister-in-law, who has probably eaten peppermint cookies, and you put pepper in it too. So I think it's in the name. I'm not sure on that. So it's mine are twice as big as they should be. So you might want to make yours smaller. Again, you have to refrigerate the dough, and I made it one day and cooked it the next. So baked it the next, and this wasn't in as hot an oven as the Merry Christmas cookies. So this is one that really smells like Christmas. So, and that's about it. And again, I found this on the internet. I think all of them are fairly similar, but it's quite a load of different places.
Okay, Mary, thank you. Sue, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here.
Want to talk about your essential peanut butter cookie?
This is a great cookie. It's got a lot of peanut butter flavor. My husband he loves peanut butter cookies, so this is his recipe. The thing I like about this recipe is that the cookies are moist. It's not a crunchy cookie. It's a moist cookie. So that it calls for a lot of peanut butter. You can use crunchy peanut butter if you want. I like smooth peanut butter, so I use the smooth peanut butter, and it calls for dark brown sugar, not the regular. You can use light brown sugar. The dark brown just gives it a nicer color. Doesn't really change the flavor that much. So that's my take on peanut butter cookies. I made sugar cookies today, which is also from this same cookbook. It's the essential chewy sugar cookie. It's right here, if you can see it. This is the cookie. It comes out. There's also an essential crunchy, but this one I like the softness. The cookie is soft. The trick to making the cookie stay soft is to not cook it too long. The recipe calls for 375, but I do it at 350 for 10 minutes, and then you take it out and let it cook a little bit on the hot tray, and then you put them to cool on a tray, and that keeps them soft. Being sugar cookies, it comes with a lot of sugar, 3 different types of sugar. The granulated sugar, brown sugar, and then light corn syrup, which kind of also helps the cookie be soft and not crunchy. I always use parchment paper to make my cookies. It's so much easier. Also, I find that if you use parchment paper instead of greasing the sheets, you have less cookie spread. The cookie doesn't melt as much, and your cookie stays the way you want it to stay. So I use parchment paper for my cookies.
It says nutmeg or lemon oil. Which one?
I use the lemon oil as opposed to the nutmeg. It's actually not even. It's.
Was that lemon extract?
It's a lemon paste, is what it's called. It's kind of like a lemon extract, but it's a little thicker. It's called lemon pure paste. It's by Nielsen and Massey, and that's what I use. I use the nutmeg when I'm making snickerdoodles, which is basically a different type of sugar cookie. But I like the bite of the lemon in the sugar cookie, so I go with lemon.
And these are from the King Arthur?
These are from King Arthur. It's the King Arthur Flour Cookie Companion book. They have another one, this is the Cookie Companion. I use this a lot when I'm making cookies. It's got a lot of different variations of the same type of cookie. So you can have some that are more complicated, some that are less complicated. This cookbook also has the essential crunchy sugar cookie. It comes out there's more of a snap to the cookie. So that's the cookbook that I use most.
And now your Italian Christmas cookies.
Oh, Italian Christmas cookies. Sometimes it's called Italian Christmas cookies. Sometimes it's called ricotta cheese cookies. It has a lot of ricotta cheese. The recipe here, the Italian Christmas cookies, it actually is a very large recipe. It makes 8.5 dozen cookies. So you can half the recipe if you're not going to use 8.5 dozen cookies. It calls for a whole carton of ricotta cheese, 15 ounces. So it's a lot of cookies. But the ricotta cheese makes the cookies so melty, melt in your mouth type cookie. It's not. It just kind of melts when you eat them. And the frosting, you just kind of pour it onto the cookie once you frost the cookie, and you can throw anything on you like on it. Colored sugar. If you're making them for Christmas, you can use red and green colored sugar or sprinkles, nonpareils, anything you really want. You want to decorate them as soon as you frost them, because if you wait for the frosting to harden, nothing is going to stick on it because the frosting hardens on top of the cookie. So you want to frost them and decorate them at the same time.
So as a children's librarian, I tried to find something that's pretty simple to do that kids can help you out with. And basically, this is just, you mix all the dry ingredients together, the quick cooking rolled oats, the coconut, the flour, and then you're just going to put the brown sugar, the butter, and the honey in a saucepan and just melt it down. Then you take the pot of melted stuff and throw it on top of the dry stuff and just keep beating like crazy with a spoon till it's all well sticky and combined. And then you want to drop it by teaspoonfuls. I use mini muffin pans, mini muffin cups. You want to grease them really well because these will stick because of the honey that's inside them and the brown sugar. So you do want to grease those muffin cups really well. I use the little mini ones. Drop them in by teaspoonfuls. They go in 350 for about 12 minutes or so. You don't want to brown them too long because then they're going to be turned into a hockey puck. You want them so just the edges are turning golden and the centers are still kind of soft. And then when we pull them out, they're going to be nice and chewy on the center then. But they're really good with like a cup of tea or so in the morning. Kids get a glass of milk and have a couple of these. You don't want to overdo it. As we found out at my house, if you start popping like, oh, these are really good, I'll have 2 more, maybe 2 more. Well, maybe I'll have another one. Next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really full. So they are a fun thing to do. The kids can mix all the dry ingredients together. Obviously, the adult would have to be doing the stuff that's in the pan on the stove. Once you pour it in, they can help continue to mix it, and then just dropping it into the little muffin cups. You can turn in larger muffin cups, I guess, but you'd have to increase your bake time.
Okay, thanks, Janet. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I could make those, but I could definitely eat those.
Yeah. The recipe makes like 50 of these at a time.
That should be enough.
Yeah, that should be enough. You would think.
Oh, is Karen here?
Yes, I am.
Oh, you are. Okay, good. Karen is going to talk about a few. By the way, I absolutely love Thumbprint cookies. I'm so glad you included this.
So I have 3 recipes here, or as I like to think about it, easy, medium, and hard. So the chocolate Thumbprints are definitely the easiest of the recipes here, and it's very straightforward. It's essentially a chocolate freckle cookie, so like a sugar cookie with chopped chocolate chips mixed into it. And then the chocolate filling is basically just chocolate chips, butter, and corn syrup melted very slowly and carefully in the microwave. Don't just toss it in there and put it on for 3 minutes because you will wind up with black tarry goo instead of nice pourable chocolate filling. And I always used to adore making these as a kid because, of course, you get to put this nice, neat, round ball onto the cookie sheet and then smash it in with your thumb. My mother recommends about halfway through baking or just as you're taking them out of the oven. Use something that is less burnable than your thumb and kind of repress that indentation in, maybe the back of a small spoon, because otherwise it gets kind of puffy and then there's not as much room for the lovely chocolate fillings that you put in there. This recipe comes from Janet Tresner. My mother was a home ec teacher here in Clarkstown, and Janet Tresner was a fellow home ec teacher in the county. So she passed away over 35 years ago, but her recipes live on in my mother's cookie box.
She lives.
Exactly.
Next one, Karen?
Yep. So if you go on to the next one. So these are Spitzbuben, which are one of my absolute favorite holiday cookies. The translation of the German name is Cheeky Boys. And you may also be familiar with these as Linsertorte, although those are a little bit different. Those are the ones that have kind of a little window in the top so that you can see the jam, usually in like a star pattern on the top of the cookie. With this recipe, I would not recommend doing that because the dough is very, very fragile once it's baked. This is actually the preparation is something that a longtime resident and friend of my mother's, Helga Johnson, came up with. The original recipe says you're supposed to roll this out and then cut circles and bake them. But whenever Mom did that, they would break before she even got them onto the cookie sheet. So Helga came up with the idea of forming them into logs and keeping them in wax paper lined paper towel rollers. Just cut the roller in half the long way so that you have two gutters, basically. And you just make it into a roll, stick it in there for a little better support, stick it in the fridge. The next day, you just slice them into 1/4-inch rounds and you've got your Spitzbuben. You bake them and then you assemble them by taking one cookie, spreading it carefully with jam, putting another cookie on top of it, and then rolling the entire thing in granulated sugar. And they're marvelous. I love them to death, and I could eat dozens of these given the chance. They're very messy, too.
Helga lives.
Helga lives. Okay, so next one. So
couldn't fit this recipe. This recipe Karen sent me was so long. It sounds like she could do a whole presentation just on this recipe.
So Lebkuchen are it's a very classic German cookie and it's a family favorite. But these are definitely a high level of difficulty cookie. It takes usually about 4 days to prepare these, and you do need some specialty ingredients, especially the Oblaten, which are the white wafers, kind of like giant communion wafers that you put the cookies on top of. If you don't have Oblaten, you can still make them. Just make sure to bake them on parchment paper because they are incredibly, incredibly sticky when you first lay them out. But basically, you mix together the recipe and then you let the dough sit refrigerated, typically for about 3 or 4 days. And that gives the spices time to marry and kind of mellow out a little bit. And then you bake them and you coat them in either a flavored sugar topping or a chocolate topping, as you see on the side here. And the recipe will be available once we post this. We can email it to you.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Pizzelles. Talking with Mary this morning about, obviously for pizzelles, you have to have one of these irons here. So if you don't have that, maybe I can convince you that they're so good you should go out and buy one. or maybe you can get someone to give you one as a gift. But these are the types of cookies I remember when I was a kid, the old kind of Maxwell House or Folgers coffee can full of these. And I kind of remember them being much bigger than they are, but I don't know if that's one of those psychological things, as I was smaller, so I thought they were bigger, or what. But they're very light, and I use anise extract, but you could use any kind of extract you wanted. Right after I started putting this together, someone brought some in where they used lemon extract and they used powdered sugar on them. And if you don't make them perfectly, like you see here, some of them aren't perfect, you have to eat all your mistakes. So, or you can take the thing off there. But they're very light, and they are delicious. So you can eat a ton of them at a time. So be very careful with that recipe. But it's kind of like a marathon, though. Like once you get it going, and then, every 30 to 45 seconds, you're taking them out and you set another timer. My sister would say, well, she would count to 30 over and over and over and over and over and over. And it makes like 6 to 8 dozen. So that's lunacy. Now you have like an Alexa or my phone, and I just keep hitting the timer and then taking them out. But they are delicious. And gingerbread cookies, this is one of those things where I thought, that's too hard, or I don't think I'd ever do that. But for some reason, probably my kids wanted to make, gingerbread cookies. So I looked it up, and this Sally's Baking Addiction is one of these websites, which ultimately, when I search the internet, I find recipes on there over and over again. And so last year I tried it, and it wasn't that hard. You just roll it out, and then if you have the cookie cutters, whether you have little men, or if you want to make gingerbread men, or if you have some other design you can make, and they do have some spice to them, with a tablespoon. She even said in her recipe, that's not a mistake. It is a full tablespoon of ground ginger. So it does have some kick, but I made them last year, and everybody loved them, and it was not that difficult. Usually when I search the internet for a recipe, I search for easy, fill in the blank, whatever it is I'm trying to make. So this is pretty easy. And 350, 9 to 10 minutes, depending on the size could be a little more, a little less, depending on the size of your cookie. And I think this is our final recipe. Veronica, are you still with us?
I sure am.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the Earl Grey?
I sure can. So my favorite thing in the entire world is a cup of Earl Grey tea with a little milk and a little sugar. And one holiday season when we were doing like a cookie exchange, I said there has to be a way to put that taste into a cookie. And there was. I was bringing them to a bunch of tea drinkers. I don't think it's a terribly complex recipe. It's pretty straightforward. Mix your ingredients together. And it just feels a little weird to open up a tea bag. So obviously you could use loose leaf tea, but because it's going into the cookie, the quality of the tea is not a huge factor. I usually use the Twinings that I just have lying around at home, which you can buy loose. But honestly, you're better off just opening up a couple of tea bags, which just feels a little sacrilegious. You do need to run it through a food processor. I would not rely on your chopping abilities as I did the first time I made these, because you will wind up with tea leaves between your teeth and it will not confer as pleasant of a taste. It is definitely a case where leaving it sit really helps the taste permeate. And I think, like many things with Earl Grey tea, it's the smell more than the taste that gives the inference of taste. So these are pretty straightforward little shortbread cookies, basically, and they're delicious, and I love them, and I wish more people made them because it's a delightful odor of bergamot in your cookies, and you can have tea in a cookie. They are, however, obviously caffeinated, so maybe limit kids' access to them. I don't know how many kids are dying to eat an Earl Grey cookie. Anyway, they're a very adult taste, but they are caffeinated cookies.
Okay, I think that's it. And Veronica, thank you so much for encouraging this webinar. And the next one is Friday, January 6th at 4 p.m. What's new and what we're reading, our most anticipated books of 2023. So can't wait for that. And please join us.